Hi, greetings from South Dakota. My name is Jade Barrett, and I'm with the Great American Bridge Store. And I'm here today to talk to you about questions you really need not to ask. It happens a lot more than it should, truly more often with less experienced players. But it still happens even with some good ones. That sometimes in the middle of an auction they ask a question that reveals their hand. Case in point. Today I opened 2 hearts in the third seat. We were not vulnerable. I had the King Jack 9-7 fifth of hearts and another queen. It had gone pass to me, so I opened 2 hearts as our style. Very undisciplined in the third seat, very aggressive. And after about 10 or 15 seconds, my left-hand opponent publicly asked at the bridge table, at the online table, what 2 hearts was. Now, there was no alert, so you would normally expect 2 hearts to be natural and weak. What they did was tell me unintentionally, and their partner unintentionally, and my partner unintentionally also knew they had a reason to ask the question. And most often, they're asking the question because they have hearts too. And in this case, they had the Ace Queen 10 fifth of hearts over my King Jack 9-7. And when the auction went 2 hearts, pass, I knew that I could not play trumps because my left-hand opponent was all over me. I wasn't certain, but I did know that it's a funny question to ask. And most players ask a question innocently, not realizing that they're really giving up so much advantage. In this case, I got to end play my opponent, and I eventually ended up only down 1, where had I been blissfully ignorant, I would have played a trump from my partner's 2 small and dummy to my hand, and I eventually would have gone down 3 or even 4. All except for the question. A couple weeks ago, my partner opened a club, and my right-hand opponent asked me how many clubs that promised. I didn't alert a club. I didn't announce it could be short. They could have looked on our convention card, which is posted online, as we're required for all of these events, and they would have found that a club shows 3 or more. But instead, they asked the question publicly. That meant that their partner got to hear them ask. Now, why would they ask? In this case, he was asking because he had 7 clubs. There are a lot of other times where you're playing against somebody you don't know, and you might think that their methods are a little unusual. So you're asking about bids that aren't alerted. You don't want to do that. My good friend Jeff Roman and I have this sort of rule that we have when we're playing in real time, face to face, that at the end of the auction, one of us, whoever's on lead, will ask, what have we learned? In other words, what we have learned from the whole auction. Not picking a bid or a specific bid or drawing attention to anything in particular, but just the dialogue. We want to know what the story is. And when we're playing with people who are more experienced, they might say, well, he has 5 spades and 3 hearts and an invitational hand. Or you might say that he has, spades and diamonds and a game-forcing hand. We might learn that he's made a couple of cupids. We might ask about cupid style, whether they cupid aces or cupid kings or shortnesses. Sometimes we'll ask if they're playing 2 over 1, because not everybody does. A lot of players play standard. But the reason we ask that question is because there's a lot of methodology that changes. You open a spade and I bid 2 clubs, that's forcing the game. We know that, there's no stopping until there's a game. But in standard American, it might go a heart, 2 clubs, 2 diamonds, 3 clubs. All pass. So we know that different things can happen. But the question, what have we learned, really helps. Instead of, looking at an auction and say, so what was that 2 heart bid? What was that 3 club bid? What have we learned? There's no negative connotation to what have we learned. And we as defenders are entitled to know what the opponents know. We're not entitled to their guesses. We're only entitled to their agreements. Asking questions about agreements, that has value. But asking about specific things, and the more specific they are, the more dangerous those questions become. Now, it's perfectly legal to ask a question, but in the matter of actively working to be as ethical as possible, it's best to ask your question in private. So, if I'm not sure about a bid that an opponent has made, I will ask them specifically, privately, what I know about that bid. They don't have to tell me their hand. In fact, I'm not entitled to that. I'm entitled to their agreement. So if the guy says it shows 5 hearts, and he actually has 4, as long as their agreement is that it's shown 5 hearts, there's no harm there. There's no foul. Might fool me, might be irritated by that, but there's nothing illegal about that. What is illegal is to intentionally not alert when you know you should. A lot of director work has to do with the failure to explain, or incorrect explanations, or untimely alerts. So when you click that alert box and you type your explanation and transfer to hearts, or 4-suit forcing, maybe you're playing Flannery, maybe when the auction goes a no trump and you bid 2 diamonds showing the majors. People tend to get lazy about this, and they really need not to be. It's not fair. It doesn't level the playing field. And it also causes people to not be able to bid accurately within their systems. So, for example, if your partner opens a no trump and I bid 2 diamonds showing the majors, you usually have something you want to do or not do based on what I have said. And it changes the meanings of your bids. So if I bid 2 diamonds showing the majors and you bid 2 hearts, that might be something good about clubs. It might be that you have hearts too. It could be a transfer to spades, but whatever it is, you're responsible for communicating anything that would be alertable. Now, the alert procedure is always in flux, though I have to admit that the team who put together the current alert procedure worked very hard to clarify things for legality and what requires an alert and what doesn't, what's legal to play and what isn't. But the one constant through all of this is that whatever we've decided is conventional and requires an alert is true at all levels of play. Even at my club at home, people have gotten lazy. It goes a no trump and they bid 2 hearts, meaning hearts and a minor as an overcall. They don't alert it, but they need to, because we play different things based on what that bid means. Sometimes they'll bid 2 clubs and it's an unknown 1 suit, but they don't alert because everybody does it where we are. Except that we don't. There are some people who play different things. They play natural, or maybe clubs and hearts, or maybe clubs and a higher. I mean, there's a lot of things it could be. So to protect all the players, right, you fill in the blank if you need to. But if you were to open a no trump and I bid 2 spades, we play that's natural. It doesn't require an alert, it's natural. But about a third of the time, my left-hand opponent will ask what 2 spades is, because they're afraid that, they use the reason and really more of an excuse that it wasn't alerted. So they're trying to protect themselves. But far too often what they have is a decent spade holding. And that question, again, damages their side, because players like me who've been around a long time, who have a lot of experience, are always wondering why you ask that question. Now, it's true, there are times where you really need to ask. Like the opponents open a club and I bid 2 clubs. And it's not alerted, because cubids generally aren't. And you need to ask because maybe it isn't both majors. Maybe it's hearts and diamonds. Maybe it's diamonds and spades. So asking when the opponents make a direct cubid and they haven't explained it in their bidding box, that's worth asking and reasonable, because your actions are based on whatever that person has done. But it's also why I encourage actively that if there's any possibility that this bid could be misconstrued, it's better to type your explanation in. It doesn't have to be a novel. I mean, there's not enough room in the alert line to write War and Peace. And there's a few abbreviations in the game that you can use, like 4SF is force suit forcing. Transfer, you see lots of abbreviations of transfer. You'll see negative double, you'll see game force. Whatever those are, Drury. Though you really should not be using names of devices. But you do want to make sure that you're alerting everything you need to. And if you forget to alert, sometimes you might end up with a poorer result, because the opponents were affected by your failure to alert. The directors are responsible for restoring equity. It's not a punishment thing. It's to make sure that the playing field was level enough and that there is a result that would be generated had they had the correct information that may be different than the one that they actually got. Now, it doesn't mean they get a free run. If you made a mistaken explanation and the opponents did something silly, they're not always entitled to a result or an adjustment, and nor are they entitled if there is no damage. Like, you forgot to say transfer. Almost never will you receive a poor ruling based on that. But there are other things that might. Like your partner opens a spade and you've elected to bid 2 clubs regularly every time you have a game-forcing hand, and you don't alert that, even if it doesn't necessarily show clubs. And that's your responsibility. So, in a situation where it goes a heart past 2 clubs, I had this happen to me, and I didn't lead a club, and it turned out that my right-hand opponent had 5 spades and 3 hearts and 3 diamonds and 2 clubs, and it was there a systemic agreement that 2 clubs was game forcing, but artificial. But they failed to alert that part. They just said it was game forcing. A bad example of an explanation. So to get back to these questions, the time to ask a question is when you have information or your actions, whether you double or bid, are going to be affected by the answer. That's a time to ask. If you have no intention of bidding in the auction or getting involved in the auction, you can save your questions till later. I mean, everybody has the right to ask a question before the opening lead. They can ask a question at any time after the opening lead. At their first time to bid, they can ask for a review. But you can ask about the meaning of a specific call at any time when it's your turn to bid or to play. But in my experience, most of the time, people ask questions they already know the answer to. Or they've convinced themselves that they need to know the answer to. If I'm your opponent and I have forgotten to alert, or my explanation is inadequate, that's what directors are for. They come and they restore equity, if need be. And sometimes it's a matter of dialect. Certain words mean different things to different people, and bridge has a lot of colloquial dialects. For example, we play the double of a no trump shows touching suits, and that includes spades and clubs, but a lot of people don't recognize that, except where I came from. And when I first started playing this device, everybody in that area knew that spades and clubs were touching, the way that diamonds and hearts are touching or adjacent. That diamonds and clubs, the majors, those are all touching suits. But I've gotten to the point where my explanation now is that when I double a no trump, I show majors or minors or both red suits or both black suits. And that's a better example of an explanation than just touching suits. Another explanation situation I don't like is when the auction goes like a spade past 3 clubs, and 3 clubs is not alerted, and it goes past and past to you, and you ask what 3 clubs is, and they say natural. That is an incomplete explanation. Is it natural and weak? Is it natural invitational? Was it supposed to be forcing and their partner just forgot? Explanations need to be clear and complete. Concise helps. Sometimes a lot of people add extra words and it muddies the explanation. So my goal for you guys today and the rest of your playing career is only ask questions you really need to know the answer to. Ask them at a time where it's not going to provide too much information to your partner. Don't ask them if you think you're going to reveal your hand to the declarer by asking the question. Believe me, that's a big one. People like me really feed on that. It'll generally give you a bad result. And when you're asked a question, be as concise and as clear as you can be. A level playing field for everybody is what guarantees that this is a game of peers. The only difference between me and my 50 years of playing and you is I have a lot more experience. But it doesn't mean I'm better. Everybody here is equal. And explanations and the alert procedure are supposed to help assure that. Thanks for listening. I hope you had a great time. I'm GS Jade Barrett. We're the Great American Bridge Tour on Facebook, and you can reach me at tournamentbridge@aol.com. Have a great game.